Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is going to be a great session. I hope we have two experts who can speak about trolls and their, I guess, the different strategies that affect either researchers, faculty writing for newspapers or any other media outlets as they're being interviewed. And so we hope that you can walk away with a list of resources and feeling that, more importantly, that you're not alone in this, right? And so I want to introduce the first guest, Isaac Kamola. He is a professor of political science in Trinity College out in Hartford, Connecticut. He is the author of many books and is also the creator and the founder of Faculty First Responders. It's an organization that offers faculty resources and helps explain basically what right-wing attacks on faculty and how this sort of is structured. He started in 2020, and he will share the reason why he started this organization. We also have Jade Sasser, our very own professor here with the Department of Gender and Sexuality Studies. She has been at UCR since 2014, and her research and teaching explores the relationship between large-scale environmental problems such as climate change and women's bodies, health, and activism, among many other things. She will also share her experience in dealing with trolls. I am adding, so that we don't take too much time, I am adding their links in the chat so that everybody has access to those, and we can go from there. Isaac and Jade, welcome. Thank you for being with us, and we'll open up the first question. I guess, Isaac, if you can tell us a little bit about first responders and the story behind your intention with this organization.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks, Sandra, for organizing this and for the Center for Ideas in Society for hosting. It's really a pleasure and a real honor to be speaking with you all today. So in 2017, in June of 2017, I was working in my office. It was a quiet summer day. And all of a sudden, my cell phone, my office phone, my email, my text, all just started blowing up with a message saying that I had to evacuate campus immediately. My kids were at the childcare center across campus, so I walked across campus not knowing if there was an active shooter, not knowing what was going on that was causing this emergency alert. I got my kids, and when I came home, I started trying to figure out what was going on. And one of my friends figured out, he said, I think it was something about something our colleague, Johnny Williams, had said that was published in Campus Reform. So I looked at Campus Reform, which is this website that had claimed that Johnny had said this outrageous thing. And over the next few days, it became clear that that's exactly what the cause was, that credible threats of violence were being called into our campus because Professor Williams' social media post had been misinterpreted, willfully misinterpreted. Our administration sanctioned him, put him on leave, and alumni called and demanded that he be fired. Students who had planned on coming to Trinity withdrew. Tucker Carlson is an alumni of Trinity College, so it went all the way to Fox News and became a national sensation for a few days. And behind closed doors, tore our community apart among faculty who were defending Johnny Williams and his right to speech, and those who thought that what he said was across the line. What happened was I began to realize through meeting people at the American Association of University Professors, if you're not a member of the AAUP, you definitely should be, get your membership today. The members of the AAUP, and I was in touch with Ralph Wilson, who would later become a collaborator of mine, and begin to examine the dark money that was funding these organizations that were behind a lot of the outrage of college campus. So it turns out that faculty reform, or excuse me, campus reform, is a project of this organization called the Leadership Institute, which is about a $50 million annual budget. 2 million of which goes to funding campus reform, which pays students between $50 and $100 to write outrage pieces about faculty, about government policies, about all kinds of things, kind of making wild accusations about liberal bias and manufacturing claims and anecdotes about how universities are hostile to conservative views. This was one of the stories that this was the story that then went viral, was one that was written by a student who's probably getting paid $50 to write that article. So I ended up doing some research on the money behind not only campus reform, but also other outlets like the College Fix, the Daily Wire, Daily Caller, Breitbart. Looked at 10 of the kind of prominent instances of targeted harassment in 2017, and noticed this kind of pattern that they went from the same outlets and they circulated within this right-wing media ecosystem. I wrote a paper demonstrating that all of these outlets are funded by the same group of wealthy, libertarian, conservative donors, and that we should be aware of this kind of well-funded attack machine. I then thought I had done my duty. I educated myself. I was like, I didn't know what this phenomenon was. I didn't know what happened to Johnny, and now I do. Okay, I'm done. And then I found out that a colleague of mine from graduate school had a similar thing. Her story didn't make it to national news, but instead she had to have security guards accompany her to class. She was worried about her job because she was a contingent faculty member, was subject to abuse online and by email. And her story wasn't told in the national news. Based on that experience and just my anger that these organizations exist, that they were, producing hate against an institution that I love, institutions of higher education, and colleagues and friends of mine. I started this organization called Faculty First Responders. And by organization, that's very loose. It's just me and a colleague of mine. And basically what we do, we've developed over the years, starting in January 2020, a method of monitoring now about a dozen websites that we know generate a lot of the targeted harassment of faculty. And then when those outlets contact a faculty by name, when they accuse a faculty by name of some sort of outrage or liberal bias, we follow up with them with an email just saying, hey, this is who these groups are. Here's who funds them, why. These stories usually don't go anywhere, but sometimes they do. And we provide some resources that's available on the website of things that faculty members can do to respond, as well as things that administrators can do in order to respond to the targeted harassment of faculty.
That's quite an endeavor. Thank you. I hope people, I will definitely send another link directly to the website. That's really wonderful. Jade, I'd like to hear if you can share your story of maybe what led you to be interested in this session and participating in the session. If you can share that story, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Thank you again for the invitation to the Center for Ideas in Society for hosting this event. I've been talking about faculty harassment through trolling for a couple of years now, following an incident that happened to me in 2021. So what happened is that initially it began in 2018 when I participated in a training that was hosted by the Op-Ed Project. The training was called Right to Save the World. A number of faculty at UCR and across the other UC campuses have been invited and encouraged to become trained in how to write op-eds, how to get those op-eds placed in large outlets across the country, and how to position our research and writing as more public facing. So following that training, I wrote an op-ed that was published in 2021 by the Los Angeles Times, major newspaper, major circulation, read daily by millions of people. Within a day or two, my article was picked, my op-ed, op-ed was picked up by the AP wire service and published in newspapers across the country. That should have been cause for celebration, to have that kind of, sort of attention to my research work. However, what happened immediately was that 15 minutes after the op-ed first appeared on the LA Times website, there was a troll in my personal email inbox full of the most vitriolic, racist, sexist, homophobic, just violent language full of threats. And it was shocking. It was frightening. And I felt completely isolated and alone. And it sort of, for a while, not for too long, but it completely derailed my celebration of my op-ed being published, because now I was concerned, who is this person? Are they going to dox me? Do they have my private information? Do they know where I'm located, etc.? So I immediately wrote to the communications office at UCR, wondering what to do. I was told to contact the UC PD. So I sent the message to our police department, and they called me, and based on the language in the message, they deemed it a credible threat and opened a case. But really beyond that, there was no other recourse for what I could do, which I found quite shocking. I followed up with a number of people, other faculty, several administrators, and honestly, I was shocked at the complete lack of resources that were available to faculty to protect us in instances such as this. And the thing about it for me that was so shocking is that we are encouraged to be public-facing scholars. We're encouraged to get our research and writing out there in front of the public in a variety of forums. But when this kind of response comes up, we don't have resources available to protect us. So I started searching for resources on my own. I used a service that scrubs my personal information from online. I removed all references to my email, my office location, etc., from my public website. I want my professional email address to stay out there, because that's how people around the country find me. That's how journalists find me to ask for, expert commentary on issues that come up. That's how people find me if they want to invite me to give talks. So I don't want to completely erase all ways of contacting me from public search sites. But I had to get really clear with myself that if I want to continue to be a public-facing scholar, it comes at a particular cost. And that cost is the comfort of feeling safe in public online. And so I don't feel safe in the same way. And it has caused me to make different decisions about things that I am willing to do and I'm not willing to do as a result.
Thank you for sharing that. That's I guess a really excellent point about balancing that public figure need, because we're a public university and you become, in essence, this expert over time, right? And do you keep all that expertise to yourself, or do you share it, with the community of the world? And yes, it's definitely a tough conversation. Maybe you can both add or speak about, but in my experience, it's the trolls are the ones who are, as Isaac said, they're organized, but they also have a megaphone, right? I want to think that the majority of people like and appreciate, a different thought and information that makes them see the world a little bit different, except most of those people don't write, right? They don't give those shout outs on social media. They don't take the time to either call you or send that nice email complimenting your work or your thought or the fact that you made them see different. So how do Isaac, how does faculty first responders, how can they help faculty and grad students who eventually will be publishing some of this content? How do we help them not get inundated in this world of fear or maybe darkness, right?
No, that's a great question. I think there's lots of different things that both faculty and administrators can do. I think, first of all, it's really important to educate oneself on the protections of academic freedom. I've demonstrated in research with my colleague Ralph Wilson the ways in which what's going on now on the right and this well-funded group of activist organizers is there's an effort to use this language of free speech, right? That everybody has the right to say everything on college campuses and use that as a battering ram to make certain ideas legitimate in higher education, to be able to, advocate for the saying, for hate speech in higher education, as opposed to the protections of academic freedom. And basically the argument about academic freedom is, the importance of being able to protect speech in the classroom, speech and research, and what they call extramural utterances. So as a citizen, we should not face persecution because of our speech, recognizing that the position of the faculty member is a unique position, right? That we can't do our job if we're not associated with an institution of higher education. And therefore, if doing our job, like teaching in the classroom, puts us at risk from somebody taking something we say in the classroom out of context and blowing it over the internet, and then if we lose our job, then we are denied that right to kind of participate in those academic conversations and academic communities. So that really understanding the protections of academic freedom, and then also organizing on campus through your labor unions, through your AAUP chapters, and in other forms in order to protect academic freedom. I think it's also really important to educate oneself on the types of right-wing media ecosystem that exists out there. I think there's this naive tendency to kind of both side the situation, to say, well, we can have conversations with people of different viewpoints. I think it's really important to understand the tens of millions of dollars a year that go into funding and creating the media outlets that then kind of propagate a lot of the outrage, that then are paying students to spy on their faculty, to write these outrage pieces that then circulate within the right-wing media ecosystem for explicitly political outcomes, right? The goal is not to, identify the truth, is not to engage in sincere academic debates where people have disagreements, but quite literally to score political points. And there's an incredible amount of money out there, both in terms of the media outlets, but also the student groups, the Students for Liberty, Turning Points USA, and other student groups that have presences on campus, and just to really appreciate kind of the amount of money that's out there to create this infrastructure, not to be daunted by it, right? Not to use that as a reason not to speak out and not to express ourselves, but to be clear about the kinds of political organization and funding that goes into the making of these attacks, and that both as faculty we understand that infrastructure, but also administrators need to understand it as well. Also, one last thing, I know I'm talking a lot here, but if you go to on the Faculty First Responders website, there's a tab for administrators, and in there we have links to a set of policies that UMass Amherst has created, which is a really great portal of clear procedures that they've laid out for what happens when faculty experience targeted harassment. So as soon as a faculty member experiences targeted harassment, they go to a portal, fill out a form, they're given clear guidance about what they can expect, how to contact campus safety, IT to scrub stuff from the internet, a whole process and procedures, guarantees of academic freedom, all the policies clearly laid out. And it's a set of proactive policies that UMass Amherst has designed to give its faculty the confidence that they have the full support of the institution. I hear a lot that sometimes faculty feel supported by their institutions, but it's oftentimes in the form of kind of informal, the dean will come down the hall and say, we got your back. But the problem with that is that you don't know if that's going to last once the story hits Fox News, once the hate mail starts pouring into the president's office or the board of trustees office. And to have a policy of publicly supporting faculty and being very clear in support of faculty and academic freedom, and doing so right at the very beginning, to not take campus reform or the college fix account seriously and not take it as something that is a representation of fact, right? But to clearly and unapologetically support your faculty's academic freedom is absolutely important.
Isaac, did you did faculty for first responders sort of work with administration to make this happen, or was this policy and that structure already in place?
This was somebody that I had been in contact through faculty first responders I had reached out to, and then she was also a dean at the time and helped develop this policy from that perspective. It's a little bit hard to find on the website, so I'll throw the link in the chat. But the policy is really great. It's a really amazing a set of policies that they've developed.
Jade, would you like to share what maybe resources you found? I know you found faculty first responders in that search that you mentioned previously. Were there any other resources that you found that were helpful to you?
Actually, it was not systematically, no. There was a lot of sort of hit and miss. I started off by just reaching out to colleagues, letting them know what had happened. Most colleagues were well-meaning, but they said things like, well, just don't read the comments. And the thing is, if you haven't experienced it, then maybe that statement makes sense. But the thing is, it's not about reading the comments. It's about people who are proactively coming to your inbox. It is people who are proactively writing articles about you on websites that you may not even know exist. I had never heard of campus reform before I found my name in an article that was published on the site. And the piece that they had taken as the source of their writing about me was actually something that was written by the Chaz Communication. Oh, sorry. Motion sensor in my office. The Chaz Communications office had interviewed a few faculty about our impressions after Kamala Harris's historic win as vice president. And the article that was written was only in the Chaz newsletter, but that piece somehow made it to campus reform through the channels that Isaac discussed. Maybe there were students at UCR who were monitoring that newsletter and sent that information on to campus reform or some other situation similar to that. And so the thing is, it's difficult if you've never been through it before to understand just how well organized some of these groups are, just how well funded they are, the kinds of extensive Google alerts that they have set up, looking for keywords that might be in an article or op-ed that you are writing or publishing. And so I think one thing that I learned is that faculty are not prepared to deal with this by ourselves as individuals, which is why organizations like Faculty First Responders are so important. Because when it happens to you and it is very egregious, you can feel like a deer in the headlights and very, very isolated. And again, even well-meaning other faculty just might not even know what to do and might say well-meaning things like don't read the comment section, but I don't read the comment section and people still came and found me in my inbox. The other thing though, I would like to say, I do think that administrators do need to provide more support to faculty. One thing that I think would be great would be if all faculty who are writing in the public sphere, or really just all faculty period, could be supported by, having a service that could be paid for monthly by admin that scrubs our personal private home addresses, phone numbers, personal private email from the internet. We could do that ourselves, but because we are public scholars and this is required for our work, I think this is something that should be provided to us by our employer. And yeah, just simply becoming more aware of more resources that are increasingly being made available to faculty as the political polarization of this country continues to intensify, as the expansion of the issues and topics that far right-wing people are going after faculty for also continues to expand. I'm certainly not the only person I know who has gone through this. I've had colleagues, department colleagues, and colleagues at other universities in gender studies who are writing about topics, queer and trans communities, homophobia, transphobia. When they write about these subjects, they have also experienced intense trolling. On the other hand, I have friends, colleagues who have written about things like environmental emotions and eco-anxiety and have been trolled and harassed for that too. I've also become aware of faculty who have written about COVID and the racial health disparities of COVID and have been harassed and trolled for that too. And so again, with political polarization and the politicization of a variety of kind of social justice approaches to inequality, the likelihood of harassment continues to grow, and the need for organizations like Faculty First Responders also continues to grow.
Oh, I completely agree. And if you can both, since you both have experienced some of this trolling and either personally or with, and again with colleagues, can you maybe share what the I guess thought process was to say I can't just hunker down and never come out because of into the world because I'm of course it's scary because I'm scared about just being trolled, about being attacked. And so what was that thought process? What was the preparation to say, I have to still have a voice and I still have to show up to class and I have to still be present for the community?
Okay, sure. I think for me, I think my research is important. I think we all do. And, but I know that my research is publicly important. So my research looks at eco-anxiety and climate change related anxiety and how that is impacting emotional and mental health for young people, and how those emotional and mental health impacts shape how young people feel about having children. This is an important subject. People talk about it all the time. It's constantly being brought up, and there have been a lot of articles written about it in public media sources, but there haven't been any systematic research-based investigations that are comprehensive. So I know that my work is important and that it is innovative and it needs to get out there. What I have done though is I have pursued different strategies for public engagement, and I haven't written an op-ed in some time. I will go back to op-ed writing, but not right now. So my other strategies right now, I've started a podcast, which is a lot of fun. I've gotten a lot of listens and no trolling. And then of course, I engage with journalists. Journalists call me for input on a variety of subjects that they are writing about. And so I do journalist interviews. I'm a guest commenter on other people's podcasts. And occasionally I'm featured in news segments on television. As always, I don't read the comments and no one is coming to my inbox. So for now, I'm good with that.
Thank you.
I think it's really helpful to think about the dark money behind these organizations, precisely because it draws a continuity with the past, in that a lot of the funders who are now funding these organizations, such as Charles Koch, started off in the response to Brown v. Board and pushed certain libertarian ideas around the idea of defund public education so that you can maintain segregated private education. And school vouchers as an economic policy was actually code word for neo-segregationist strategies. This has been widely covered by Nancy McLean, and others have drawn out this connection. And it's in the footnotes there in Milton Friedman's Capitalism and Freedom too. But I think that it's really helpful because it understands this well-funded racist libertarian backlash as something that sees integration and sees critiques of power and critiques of racial capitalism as an existential threat. And therefore what we are seeing, this kinds of trolling, like incredible amounts of resources that are put into harassing faculty who, you know, teach classes and write op-ed. We're hardly a scary class of people, right? But the fact that so much effort is put into trying to silence our voices, I think is indicative of how scared they are by the ideas and the changes in the ways the academy works, who's included in the academy, the ideas the academy is creating, the ideas that used to be treated as serious that are now treated as no longer irrelevant and are seen as passé, that don't correspond with the world that these donors and trolls want to see. That the university, well, we may not see the university as threatening, we may see it as just, you know, a place in which citizens are trained and where we do our academic research and we follow the guidelines and best practices within our discipline, and we, you know, push forward academic conversations, that is seen as a kind of existential threat to certain people. And therefore I think it's really important that we be serious, like that the ideas that we produce are really important. And like Jade says, that, you know, her research is really important, and the fact that somebody finds it threatening means that it's even that much more important, that there's an effort to silence it, that there's research and that there's resources that are going into silencing it, I think is indicative of just how important that research is. And we all need to just appreciate the work that we're doing and being part of a, you know, a social transformation, and to be part of the production of a new world, a better world, a more just and equitable world. And that that takes place in the academy, and there's certain people who don't want to see that world, and you know, we have to realize that they're not going to roll over, that they're deeply entrenched interests that are opposed to a better world.
I like what you said about thinking of the history, because it certainly has been, if you think of certain groups, you know, that are now part of our country, that oppression and suppression has been certainly part of, you know, the history. And I think we easily forget that has always been. This is how you keep certain communities in certain, you know, low income without education, because you oppress and suppress. And so that's really interesting point. If we can just think of the history and then think of somebody always voiced and made the breakthrough, right? So that we can, you know, break away and help those communities. The other question was, when you're talking about the history and educating the public, but most importantly, our students, right? You teach, your faculty, you teach the students who sometimes might grab a, you know, video of something or think of something you said and take it out of context. But how do faculty members carry on these conversations in class and say, we will be discussing X, Y, and Z that to you might be controversial? Is there sort of like a warning statement at the beginning of class? Because yes, you will be teaching students who come from families who don't agree necessarily with what you teach or what you research, right? And so, but how do you welcome these students' point of view, and how do you also make them say, well, this is what I teach and this is what I'm presenting to you?
That's tough, because on the one hand, I think it's this kind of attack is kind of a form of stochastic terrorism, right? And you can't predict where it happens. Like Jade mentions, all kinds of things that are completely within disciplinary debates are among people who are part of those conversations are not in any way eyebrow raising. They're just like what academics are working on. And it's only when they get mangled and misinterpreted that they become something that's shocking and outrageous. And so I think that, and also I think that that is a much less of a likelihood. It's not every faculty member that's being trolled. And it's also like that in a way, like, given the amount of resources, given the amount, you know, that there's the odds are quite low. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And therefore, I think that it's really important for those to keep doing what we're doing, knowing that this is a possibility, but it's not a likelihood, if you will, right? And that being said, faculty members, faculty of color, queer, gender, non-conforming faculty, according to a survey that we've done of faculty members who were written about by campus reform in 2020, are disproportionately likely to be taught about, or to be written about. If you write about race and gender issues, you're way more likely to be written about in campus reform. So the harm is not evenly distributed, but I do think that it's really important not to not do what to change your teaching because of the threat that somebody may be there. So for example, in 2020, that survey I mentioned, we found that 40% of faculty members who are written about by campus reform received threats of harm. So 40% of people who are faculty members written about by campus reform in 2020 received threats of harm. And about those, a little less than 40% changed their social media, and a little bit more than 12% changed their teaching because of that, after having received threats of harm. So the chilling effect, I think, is very real. But I think that, in my experience, it's important not to give in not to give into it, but be prepared and be prepared that this is a possibility. But don't make it easy. Don't censor yourself, but also don't make it easy.
Yeah, I would just add to that. Indeed, it does create a chilling effect. It is unsurprising, but actually infuriating that the people who are most likely to be targeted are people who are already members of marginalized groups. When I think about the article on campus reform where I was named, the other faculty at UCR that were named in that same article were also women of color. And actually, every person I know personally who has been harassed, trolled, or otherwise targeted in this way has been a woman faculty member, and or a queer faculty member. And so, of course, I don't want to give in to trolls, and nor would I recommend or suggest that anyone give in to trolls or do what harassers want us to do, which is to simply shut up. But it is important, as we've been describing, to be aware that there actually is some amount of threat that some of these people can pose. So there is a faculty member at another university who I went to a webinar where she talked about writing op-eds. She's a very prolific op-ed writer and a prolific commenter on various news shows, and she's a political science professor. I asked her a question in the chat about trolling because she hadn't mentioned it, and I thought anyone who's as public facing as her has got to be dealing with trolls. And so when I asked the question, she said, that's the one thing where I don't have anything positive to say, because the reality is I've had to completely change the way that I kind of navigate my everyday life on campus as a result of trolling. She no longer reads her email, her professional email. She had to hire someone to read and manage email for her because 80% of it comes from trolls. Based on her public engagement. All of her, her website and any kind of social media presence has had to scrub any reference to her office on campus, her office location, etc. There is security at the entrance to her building now, security that was not there before because of threats that were made in person. And despite all of that, she was quite clear that she refuses to stop publicly engaging because the work is that important. And she encouraged us to do the same, to refuse to stop publicly engaging, but to be very, very clear on what the stakes are and to equip ourselves with resources to manage those stakes. And I also do want to say there's nothing wrong with choosing different venues or avenues for public engagement that you feel more comfortable with. I think that I am less likely to write an op-ed and more likely to do the other kinds of things that I mentioned. So talking to journalists, doing television news spots, focusing on podcasting, that type of thing. These are also ways of getting a message out there, in addition to, you know, the writing and publishing that I'm doing. So it's not as if choosing a different set of public outlets to get the message out, it's not as if that is any less important public engagement. But in my experience and in the experiences of people I know, certain forms of engagement entail a swift response in ways that others don't. So maybe some of that cost benefit analysis can also be applied to making decisions about how and where and with whom we engage through our research.
Yes, I think that's definitely a great point, is maybe not being selective, right? And what to do and when to put your name and your research and what media outlet, and hopefully communications departments at Isaac's school and in our office and within the colleges at UCR, that we can sort of help be one of those barriers, right? Will assist. I know I have done that with a couple of faculty members who say, hey, I don't know much about this reporter. Is this reporter legitimate? Is this a legitimate, invitation to interview? And so we have a couple systems that we can certainly verify. So I hope that other faculty members know that and are aware of this. Part of our intent behind offering these webinars is to make ourselves more visible and see ourselves hopefully as a resource to the university. How do you work with your own communications department, Isaac?
I mean, they're aware of what I do. I think that's an important part, is that administrators and communications offices should be aware and know the research that's being done on campus, especially if it's likely to fall in the crosshairs of right-wing trolls. To be able to understand the argument, that was a big problem that happened in 2017, right? Was a sociologist who studies race was speaking a language that wasn't understood by the communications department, by the president. And so in that way, I think that it's really important that everybody knows, and I think it's a great opportunity. You want to highlight what faculty are doing, but it's also important to know what is going on, the great research, research that's being done on campus, and not only to be able to spotlight it, but also be able to understand it in a way that can provide the kind of defense. I think it's really, really important to always trust your faculty, right? That faculty are speaking from a position of expertise, with long training, with disciplinary standards and expectations, that have done the work to deserve to be given the benefit of the doubt. I think that was a huge problem at Trinity, was that this obscure website was given more credence for saying what my colleague said than my colleague himself, right? And that their interpretation was given like, oh, that's what was said, as opposed to the scholar of race who was speaking from a position of expertise and professional training and knowledge, and I think that just default trust the faculty, I think, is really just a good starting point. And also that doesn't, trusting the faculty just doesn't also start in a position of crisis, like, oh, there's a crisis, we better trust the faculty, but it should become an ethic throughout the communications department. So if you trust your faculty, what kind of procedures and policies do you have to put in place so you have their back? And make sure that that's the kind of default response is to trust your faculty.
That's really great. So I know we spent a good chunk of time trying to think through and sort of dissect this, how to deal with the trolls, but I guess I shouldn't call them trolls, but throughout your career, can you maybe share one story of where you have gotten a positive email, a positive feedback for the kind of work that you do and the kind of thinking that you provoke, within readers and other researchers alike? Maybe just so that we don't end on on an dooms story.
Oh, absolutely. I get very positive feedback all the time. I get emails from other faculty around the country, appreciative of my work, appreciative of my book. My first book was written up in the New York Review of Books with a very positive review. My current research that I mentioned on eco-anxiety and parenting plans, I get a lot of very, very positive feedback from young people who say that they're so glad that I'm doing this work, which is, again, a reason why, despite the chilling effect of trolls and harassers, I understand that it's very important that I continue to do this work. My work is very critical of race and gender politics, and that critique continues to need to be advanced in this society. And to have feminist, anti-racist work out there, I would never retreat from that. So yes, the good outweighs the bad in terms of the response. But the bad, it's just an important reminder that we are not operating in a vacuum. We think we're in the ivory tower, but when our words move beyond the tower, we are opening ourselves up to people who are not interested in academic inquiry or concerned with academic freedom. As Isaac has said, we are now exposing our ideas to people who are part of a very well-funded machine that is not only neoconservative, but quite frankly, very interested in regressive race and gender politics. And so that's important to make note of as well.
One of the emails that I got that I through my work with faculty first responders, it's the greatest pleasure of that work is hearing from faculty, and just the kind of the courage that I see every day from faculty is just really remarkable. There's one faculty member who was written about for a event that she was planning, so the event hadn't happened yet. And she was getting death threats for that event. And, an event on interrogating whiteness and, in an area of the country with a huge history of white supremacist organizing. And she went through with that event. And for me, that's a incredible sign of optimism that knowing the threats, working with the police to think about evacuation routes from the venue, despite all of that, continued to go through with the event and which was a huge success. And I think that's the work that we need to keep doing, and we need to keep supporting each other to make sure that we can keep continuing to do it, that it's everybody's responsibility to fight trolls, not just those who are being trolled themselves, but it's everybody's job. And we need to make sure that those who are scared of losing do in fact lose, right? That those who are on the wrong side of history don't end up winning, right? Is that, that this is a really important fight that we're a part of, and we really have to win it. And that's going to require being organized, being compassionate, and being supportive of each other, because in solidarity we can overcome this kind of adversity. So
yes, thank you. Does your organization, Isaac, put together, I don't know, a conference or a workshop where our faculty members or grad students who might be watching this either now or a later time can participate in?
No, but that's a great idea. I do a lot of this kind of events, you know, and I meet with groups. I meet with AAUP chapters. I currently have a funding from the AAUP in order to do the monitoring work, to be able to hire a project coordinator to do that work. And I'm so thankful for the support from the AAUP to be able to do that. And I'm more than happy to talk to whoever. You know, if you're being trolled, or you know somebody who is, or you want me to talk to your school or whoever, I'm more than happy to do that. So.
You know, one question we had from a previous previous webinar, he asked, sometimes trolls are not, you know, people that you don't know, or these, you know, political interest party. It might also come from within the university, and how do you deal with that was part of his question. Can maybe you address, or both Jade and Isaac?
That's hard. That's really hard. I think that it's always important to follow kind of university policies. It's really important for institutions to have clear policies and grievance policies in place. And it's important that they follow AAUP standards in order to include representation and due process, transparency, and rigorous protections of academic freedom, that those hearings are in the hands of faculty committees and not ad hocly created by administrators on the fly. And so if an institution has good policies in place and the community is committed to following those policies, if there is an internal harassment that's taking place, then hopefully those policies will be up to snuff in order to go through a process. You know, I also think that in the same way that, you know, social shaming, I think, is also a strategy if that works in particular instances. I think that there's a tendency to respond to harassment with collegiality, and there may be situations in which that's not the case. If you have an asshole on campus, either directly or through a whisper campaign, let everybody know that he's or she, but probably he's an asshole, right?
That's a good advice. Jade?
Of course, I agree with Isaac, and yeah, I would say also, you don't have to respond with collegiality or being diplomatic. You know, in addition to whatever policies are in place, you can simply choose to, if possible, completely disengage with that person, or only engage with them through whatever channels on campus, through your chair, the chair of your department, through a mediator, through you know, the person who deals with faculty grievances or campus-based grievances, etc. So I agree, collegiality is not necessarily the best response when being met with harassment and trolling from a colleague.
Well, thank you. No, we're running out of time. You know, I can go on asking more and more questions, but maybe just so that we respect everybody's time. Any last minute thoughts that you would like to share in terms of our theme, right? Dealing with trolls and carrying on with your research publicly.
I would say it's very important, of course, to not let these well-funded far-right alt-conservative groups win. Again, their goal is to silence those of us who are critiquing systems and structures of power and inequality and hierarchy, and working to dismantle those structures and to try to silence us is the goal, and is the agenda, and is the target that we have to keep in our minds to prevent us from allowing the chilling effect to actually take hold. I also want to go back to something that Isaac mentioned, which is that I think faculty can and should band together more to think about these issues and perhaps address them proactively. not wait until something like this has occurred and try to figure out where do I go, who do I talk to? But, you know, to actually make more resources available to each other based on the policies that are in place and to collectively demand more resources for ourselves. I think that more of us faculty, it would behoove us to really understand our own collective power in demanding resources from our administrators. We are, in fact, the ones that are the public face of the university through our research, through our community engagement. And so what we are willing to take as a result of doing that community engagement has to some extent be driven by the kinds of protections, resources, and support that our administrators are willing to provide for us, and to not simply allow it to be something that we take as, oh, this just happened to me as an individual. No, this is systematic. This is happening to a lot of people, and we need to collectively resist.
That's so important. And I think it's important that the same people that are funding campus reform, the College Fix, Breitbart, Daily Caller, Daily Wire, are the same people that are funding the organizations that are transforming the laws in Florida and Texas and other states to abolish tenure, to put politically appointed trustees and presidents in charge of the hiring and firing of faculty, to prevent the teaching of quote unquote divisive concepts such as true histories of American history. That is really important, that this is all part of the same project. You delegitimize faculty members through these kinds of campaigns and infrastructures of harassment in order to justify, in order to create the raw material that you can turn into the outrage that then becomes a fundamental top to bottom transformation of higher education. If DeSantis gets his way in House Bill 999, for example, you'll have a complete restructuring of who's in charge of higher education. You'll have a destruction of faculty governance with partisans able to determine curriculum. And I think that's the end goal, and it always has been. So the targeted harassment is not the only show in town. It's actually part of this broader strategy funded by the same groups, and to see them as part of the same. And therefore a resistance to online trolling and harassment is also resistance to efforts to, remake higher education. And education has to be defended, and we're the ones to do it. So.
Well, thank you for those comments. It's really great to hear that and be inspired, and sort of, and for all of us who are not faculty to think of this, for all of us who are communicators to think of these points and process them so that we can also become better support systems for our faculty. So thank you so much to both Isaac and Jade for joining us today. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I have really enjoyed listening to your experiences and points of views. And thank you for everybody who joined. I'm hoping this will be available. It's been recorded and will be available later. So we're hoping that others can also benefit from the conversation and all the great information that you provided today. Thank you, and we'll see you another time, Jade and Isaac.
Great.
Thank you.